The Killing Fields, 1-to-1 scale skirmish battles by the Purple Druid, a scholar of our hobby. The Purple Druid, he's got a YouTube channel. Go check it out. Link in the description, yada, yada, yada. He also has a Substack for you readers, wargameculture.substack.com. The Purple Druid has spent the last 3 to 4 years investigating the roots of our hobby. He has dug down deep. He's climbed neck deep in the primordial ooze where our hobby comes from and how it developed during those critical early years. But he took his researches one step further. He didn't just read the books, he played the games contained therein. He wanted to see how those games operated, and the only way to do that is to pull the levers and push the buttons, get it on the table, give it a whirl, see what works, see what doesn't. From his researches, he cobbled together what he feels are some of the best and most interesting mechanics. This is kind of an OSR game for miniature wargamers. It's not a reskin of any one game. It's a collection of a number of mechanics and subsystems from multiple games to create a unified whole that I think will provide some valuable insights to our hobby and may just inspire you to greater heights in your hobby pursuit. I'm not going to do a full flip through of this game. I think it's kind of lazy. It's kind of cheap. I do it myself. It's easy content. Instead, I'm going to key in on a couple of key things in these rule books, things that I think are worth talking about, things that it does that other people don't. So we start with the front matter, obviously. Purple Druid, we're not quite done with that. He also runs the Wargame Paradigm, a very interesting adventure wargaming zine. You can check that out here at itch.io, or look, we all know what Google is. Just look up the Wargame Paradigm. So here on page number 7, finally, it's actually the first page of the rules proper, if you don't count all the table of contents and add content and stuff. Right out of the gate, why another miniature war game? This is something I think not enough rules do. Tell me, what are you doing here? What are you hoping to accomplish? What are you doing that other people don't? And it's little design notes. Why did you make the choices you did? Let me know what's going on, what you're thinking. Helps kind of set the mood, establish a pace. And you can go back and read that after you've gone through all of the, I think there's about 60 pages here. What are we up to? 59? About 40 pages worth of rules. And then you can get even more insight. Now, in this case, as I said, Purple Druid is a historian, so he went back to the game that was a precursor for chainmail. It's called The Siege of Bodenberg. This was published in Strategy and Tactics in 1967. In 1968, the author, Harry Bodenstedt, just brief aside, the Bodenberg, written by Bodenstedt, naming the cities in your game after yourself, total boss move, total Chad move. I love that. So this was published, like I said, 1968, but he held it at a little convention you may have heard of called Gen Con. Not many people had back in 1968. One of the people who had was Gary Gygax. I'm not a historian. I think he might actually have organized and run Gen Con 1. And he saw this little game. It was a set-piece battle of a siege of a castle and was fascinated. It was wildly popular. It used those elastilin figures, and elastilin had I think it was like a vac, one of those vac plastic molded castles. People loved it. It was a success. And wouldn't you know it, Gary Gygax would go on a couple of years later to launch his own game, loosely inspired by the Siege of Bodenberg. So we're already building those connections. And this Siege of Bodenberg was also a huge inspiration for the Killing Fields. But not content to point to the people that the giants on whose shoulders he's standing. The Purple Druid also says, I was going to collect all of this into one big tome, but I realized Henry Hyde had the same idea 7 years earlier. So Henry Hyde, again, we have a situation where Purple Druid is giving credit to everybody that inspired him, including Henry Hyde. And I think that's really important. I think that's something else that not enough people do in our hobby. Just be honest about who your inspirations are. People love that stuff. It'll inspire them to go back and look. You're not in competition with your forebears. You're building on what they do. Or even your current bears. In the case of Henry Hyde, he's still with us. God willing, he will for a long time. He's a tough old buzzard. If you've been following him for the last few years, you'll know that it takes a little bit more than the big C to knock him off his rocker. Godspeed. So then we get to the other thing I want to talk about here, and this is where you can kind of see some more influence. You can make more of those connections. The troop types in this game, light, medium, and heavy, infantry, and cavalry. Chainmail uses those chainmail calls it light heavy and armored, which still confuses my poor brain. But here we go, light, medium, and heavy. Very easy. And then we have a couple of different features, wagons and war engines for you Hussites out there. Attributes, pretty simple. You know, you've got elite, veteran, trained. Really, you have basically move rates. Well, let's just turn the page here to our example. Now, this is a loose stat line game. Different troops move different distances. Light infantry, for example, move 5 inches in clear terrain. If all they do that turn is move, they can move 10 inches. So we have clear, hill, wooded. Now, might and vigor are essentially combat dice and hit points, respectively. But you do have to track. This game is built for campaigns, and it's built from the bottom up for campaigns. A lot of games will design the tabletop battle, and then they'll say, okay, now how do I put the icing of a campaign system on top of that cake of the game itself? The Killing Fields starts from the perspective of these are campaigns, and how do we integrate both of those together? So your tabletop battle stats include recent history, and that's where this line comes in. Without quality, obviously, is whether, veteran green, we know what that is. What was the recent experience? If they prevailed, they're going to be full of piss and vinegar, man. They're feeling their oats. They're really cocky and confident. We won the last time. Why wouldn't we win this time? That's going to come into play later in the rules. Physical condition. If they had a good night's sleep, they had a good breakfast, did a little light stretching, they're going to be better at fighting than the guys who got up at 2 a.m. and hiked 8 miles on a light breakfast and finally got to the battlefield and had to dig a hole or put, trenches or their stakes in the ground. They're not going to be as effective as they might. So the last battle is going to influence this battle. So you have this nice little campaign system included right out of the gate. I like that. It might be a little bit more to track, but I think the effort will be worth it when you sit down at the table. Leaders, of course, have different leadership values, and we see what their command radius are and what their rally rolls are. By the way, I think it's mostly D6s in this. No, that's not true. That's not true. It uses a pretty odd hodgepodge of dice, including average dice, which we love. For those who don't know, an average die replaces the 1 with a 3 and the 6 with a 4. So the average roll, right, it's 1, 2, 2. I'm sorry. The faces of an average die are 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5. So you cluster the results around that 3 to 4, but if you roll a bunch of them and add them together, like the average value will still be the same as a D6. We'll see how that operates here in a little bit. The turn sequence is really complicated. There's a lot of back and forth. It is essentially an I go, you go system, except your red force will issue orders, and then you'll move your men and engines, and then you'll try to rally, and then blue team shoots. So red moves, blue shoots, and then red will do its war engine fire, so cannons, catapults. Then you check for valor in base-to-base contact. Then you do this, and here's where one of the other things. This is really interesting. Let me set this aside for the moment. We're going to flip that later. Let me just finish it, I guess. Charging figures complete. Then you do melee, and then it's the other team's turn. So blue moves, red shoots, blue fights. Okay, now this is really interesting because most games, what will happen is 2 units will meet. One will charge, one will not. And when they meet, or there may be a charge and a counter charge where they both count as charging. But when they meet, they fight a round of melee, and then whoever suffers the most casualties, or maybe both, like Dragon Rampant, both sides have to check. But if you lose more casualties, there may be a penalty. Point being, first you do melee, and then after melee, you see what are the results on the morale. In the Killing Fields, we reverse that. It's not the only game to do that. Bear in mind, Chainmail does have a morale phase before cavalry fight. When you're charged by cavalry, whether you're foot or mounted, you have to make a morale check to see if you stand and face that charge. I would posit that is the beginnings of a morale phase before melee. But here, we have an explicit, no. Anytime anybody wants to fight, you're going to come together and you're going to look at the odds, and then one side or the other is going to feel really good about it, or one side might feel really bad about it. And if a side feels really bad enough, they may decide it ain't worth all the trouble and that there's something much more interesting to do over here. You guys go ahead and have fun. We are out of here. And so you have this interesting situation where you have to do morale before melee. And this is what I mean by I'm not doing a full flip through. Because the morale system here is really interesting. You Hex Encounter guys will know exactly what this is and how this works. It is a combat results table that uses the odds to generate a D10 column that you roll on to find out who does what. So the way this works, if I have 5 guys who are light troops and they have a might, all right, that's your melee skill, of 1 apiece, that means I've only got 5 total strength points to throw into the pot. If you've got 5 medium troops with a might of 2, you've got 10. You have a 2-to-1 advantage over me. So you figure out this little ratio, the attacker to defender. 2-to-1 means we're rolling on this column here. And I'm going to take 2 extremes here. If the attacker is badly outnumbered, 1-to-4, I've charged in, I got 1 guy against your 4, we're going to roll on this column here. Flip it around. If I've got 4 times as many guys, we roll on this column. So what's the difference? What do all these little strange symbols mean? Well, in the case of M, we just fight a melee. So it could be, yeah, and through most of the cases, when it's fairly even, that's what this diagonal line means here. If we're at 1-to-1, we have a 50% chance. We're just going to go ahead and move on to the melee resolution mechanic. On the other hand, if I'm outnumbered by 1-to-4, we roll that D10, there's only a 20% chance we're going to do that because there's a much greater chance, and that's where you see this first letter here is the letter A. That means the attacker suffers some result. Withdraw 2d6 inches. That's what the W means. R means route. You might route 2 moves. You might route 1 move. Attack. What does X mean? I got to turn the page here. I think, now it depends. And each of these combat results tables are different. So AX is attacker eliminated. All of the figures involved are removed from the table. AX. The other one is C, captured. Okay, so let's go back and look at our chart here. So if we roll an 8 or better, the attackers are completely wiped out. We don't even need to fight the melee. There's a chance that they're all eliminated. They're just killed outright. There's a chance that they're captured, which is a great result for the defender because for every 5 people that surrender, so your enemy loses 5 guys, you lose 1 because the 1 guy has to serve as a guard and he has to start marching those figures across the table. So you can have, you might be able to use your light cavalry to do a sweeping move. Remember, they move a lot faster to rescue those captured fighters or warriors as the case may be. Flip that around. If I am dogpiling your guy 4-to-1, oh, you got 5 troops, I got 20. Then we roll on this and you're going to have to get a result of a 10 because it's in order to just to fight that 4-to-1 melee. You're saying there's a chance. But there's also a good chance in this case, if the attacker outnumbers the defender 4-to-1, look at this, the first 4 results are either captured or eliminated. The next 5 results are the defender says, it ain't worth it, bro. I'm out of here. Very simple. D10. And you might get a little bonus. Maybe you have a +1. Maybe you have a -1 on these rolls. So this should actually be a 1 minus. I don't quote me on that. But there is one thing that might happen. Oh yeah, here we go. Modifiers. If you have a flank attack, a target unit is charged to the flank, the Valor table will be shifted 1 column to the right. Meaning, if I have a 1-to-1 ratio, I've got just as many guys as you do, but I charge you in the flank, we move over 1 column this way. And so now, this attacker withdraws is what removed from the table. I've doubled my chances of sticking around for the fight. This is a very powerful table because it incorporates a number of different variables to achieve variable results. In other words, you don't just have to worry about how many attackers versus defenders. You're not just rolling 1 die for each of the attackers and each of the defenders. You condense all of that down into a single melee roll of a D10. Fate, there's always a chance, but there are limits to how much you can achieve based on how many guys you have in the fray. And with this simple mechanism, you have a wide range of results with a single die roll. Do they stay and fight? Do they run? Who runs? How far do they run? Are they captured without a fight? Do they just give up and realize that it ain't gonna happen, bro? That's a lot to do in just a single die roll. What happens if you roll an M on that table? The most complicated result on the Valor table is M because it means both sides have decided, yeah, we're throwing down, buddy. It takes 2 to tango. and I can hear the music playing already. You're going to need 3 different colored sets of dice. In the rule book, the Purple Druid says green and white for the attacker, meaning the one who charged, or if the melee carries over into the next turn, whoever is the active player, he's going to be rolling 1 white die and 1 blue die, in my case, for every point of might. Then the defender rolls 1 red die for every blue die that's rolled, up to the same number, unless, and it gets a little, and there's some stuff here I don't understand. I'm going to have to play it. It's that kind of game. It's complicated. It makes you think, wrinkles your brain. We like those kind of games. So if I botch a little bit here, understand, I need to see it played out. And maybe this will be a good indication for the Purple Druid of where he could tighten up the language and make things a little clearer. This is, after all, kind of a review, kind of a play test. Like I said, it's in beta test, so it may be a little clearer by the time you watch this video 3 years from now, and this is a smash hit that sold 1 million copies. Let's hope. All right, so what happens? Well, and I'm not quite sure about the way this is presented because we have a nice little checklist. So let's just roll and find out what happens, okay? The attacker may roll a pair of blue and white dice for each point of might. Now we get a 3-on-3 fight. So I'm going to roll these and we'll just line them up however, okay? That was a 6. And then the defender rolls 1 red die for each point of the attacker's might. He may choose to roll fewer dice. I'm not sure why he would. Maybe we'll figure it out here as we go. But let's just go ahead and roll the 3 of them. So there's our 3 defender dice. If any of the red and green dice are matched, if there's a double, a defender may choose to re-roll both of the matched dice. Okay, but do I need to line them up in order from lowest to highest? Because we got 2 1s. So I think that means the defender can say, yeah, let's re-roll these. And he probably will, because generally wounds are scored on a 1 or a 2. So the defender says, yeah, we're going to re-roll those. And I think you just do it 1 time. So I don't know that changed anything. 1 reroll. That might need to be explicit here. Maybe it isn't. I just didn't see it. All right. Wounds are caused for each 1 or 2 scored. Figures with a might greater than 1 are marked with a wound. Right. So if you have a might of 3, if these are 2 third-level fighters, let's say, they both have a might of 3. The attacker scores 2 wounds against the defender, and the defender scores 1 against the attacker. If you have 3 1s, bing, bang, boom, one of the figures is immediately eliminated. On a 1 through 4, it's the attacker. Nope, the defender is immediately eliminated because we had the 3 1s. So that explains why you may or may not want to re-roll, depending on whether you're the defender or not. I'm still not sure why you would want to roll 2 dice. If you're the defender and you can roll 3, why would you want to roll 2? I got to be honest, I'm not sure why you would do that. Okay, roll a d6 for each wound and subtract from the defender's vigor. Wounds are caused on a 1 or 2. Figures that might greater than 1 are marked with a wound. Roll a d6 for each wound. Oh, my goodness. So our defender is going to lose 3 vigor. And our attacker is going to lose 5. Oh, so even though he got twice as many hits, he got fewer vigor. But I think that kills them both. Roll dice for each figure in base-to-base combat. So if I have a unit of 5 versus a unit of 5, I have to work my way across the full unit. Remember, this is 1-to-1. That unit of 5 guys is not 50 or 100. It's literally just 5 guys. So I have 5 1v1s. Interesting. Unless I had a unit of 5 charge a unit of 3. Then I have to start worrying about what happens with multiple figures. And unlike most games where it's just a -1 to the attacker or whatever, what will happen is if I've got 2 light infantry who have charged into and attacked a single light infantry, then my 2 light infantry, I've only got 1 might each, will roll 2 dice. Well, actually 4, right? They're going to score. So these are the wound dice. And I'm still not quite sure what these are. Wounds are caused for each 1 or 2 scored. Oh, so the attacker actually has twice as many chances to hit. So anyway, my 2 guys are attacking 1 guy. You always roll the same number of defense dice. It says roll 1 die for each point of attacker or less. If a figure is outnumbered, it must roll as many red dice as the total might arrayed against him. So if you are fighting the same number of guys, you can choose to roll less dice. But if you're outnumbered, you have to roll 1 defensive die for each of the vigor. Let's just say it's a might of 2 I got a strong guy and a weak guy fighting one weak guy. That weak guy will still roll 3 dice. So we'd have that same scenario. Yeah. So with every additional might, you're actually adding twice as many dice. So you have twice as many chances. We'll roll through this one more time and see if we can learn anything from it. The defender has a 1-1 and a 3. The attacker has all kinds of stuff. So we have a 1-1. Somebody is eliminated. At least one person. But the defender says, yeah, I don't like that. So we're both going to roll these ones and see what happens. Yeah, so now we don't have anybody eliminated. The defender was smart to do that. The defender is going to take 1 hit, and the attacker will as well. So the defender is going to do 3 wounds, and the attacker is going to do 5. So I think both sides are probably dead in that case anyway. You subtract that from the defender's vigor. Oh, not from his might, from his vigor. Okay. Yeah, like I said, that's kind of hit points. So valor, vigor, and might. Those are really the 3. Defender chooses to counterattack or withdraw. Counterattack. Defender moves reinforcements first. So there is another interesting thing where right here in the middle of the combat, here's a wonderfully illustrative illustration. My, how the turntables have turned. 2 light cavalry charge a unit of 5 archers, and the archers shoot at them, and they don't kill the cavalry. So the cavalry do their attack. Now it's the defender's turn to counterattack. They have the option to bring reinforcements into the fight. If the cavalryman had run down this archer and ridden off, the fight is over here. But because the cavalryman didn't finish off the guy he was charging, he now is bogged down in a melee, and he's going to get goon swarmed, and he's going to be fighting that 4v1. All in the same combat turn. So it is, like I said earlier on, it's a very complicated system, but I think it will flow naturally once you get it on the table. I'm looking forward to that. And then we have some special combat rules, kind of advanced stuff. If you have long weapons, spears always attack first. They can be, spears can be wielded in ranks. So pikes are even longer. So you have weapon length. That's important. Units with long weapons versus cavalry do not subtract casualties before rolling their red dice. Got it? Don't charge spears. That's how that rule works. Rules for thrown weapons, and then we have this delightful little scouting procedure. The scouting procedure is a nice little mini game that I think could be ported into a lot of other games. This is a slightly complicated. It's a little more complicated than, hey, let's just find out who gets to deploy first. You have to have already determined who the attacker and defender are. We're not just going to do a D6. Instead, we're going to take a normal deck of playing cards. We're going to take all of the red cards out and all the black cards out. Actually, we're going to take all the red diamonds and clubs in this case. You could use hearts and spades. Nobody's going to turn you into the wargame cops. Point is, we each have 13 cards. Ace through 2 from high to low. And we're going to turn over 1 card at a time. We're going to do this 5 times. And we're going to keep track of who wins how many times. Maybe the attacker wins 5 times. Maybe the defender wins all 5. But before we do that, we're going to influence things just a little bit more. The side with the lower morale is going to lose 1 card before you draw. Or I guess you could. You could just shuffle them up. And if I have lower morale, that top card, I'm just going to put it off to the side. It can't play. The side with the lower leadership loses a card. The side with the lower initiative loses a card. So you may be down to just 10 cards versus 13. That makes it more likely that you're going to lose a few of these draws, particularly if the cards that you don't look at them, maybe you lose your ace, your king, and your queen. Oh man, you're in trouble now, right? Okay, so we do our little 5 draw, and if an ace beats a jack, queen, king, something special happens. But we'll get to that in a second. First, let's look at what happens if the attacker wins all 5 of those draws. Then the defender has to put all his forces down first. Then the attacker chooses a defensive unit to be moved D6 inches in any direction and facing. I think he does that after deployment. So blue deploys, attacker deploys. The attacker gets 1 unit that gets to make a free move, basically. If the defender only wins 1 of those card draws, you eliminate that free move. Defender deploys first, then the attacker gets to deploy his force however he chooses. In a 3-2 situation, the attacker wins 3 of these and the defender wins 2. Then the attacking figure and unit may make 1 normal move in any direction. It's not explicitly stated here, but I think we can infer deploy as normal using the deployment rules presented earlier in the games, or for whatever game you're playing. Just deploy as normal. But because the attacker has 1 more win on the card draws, he gets to make 1 normal move. Then, if likewise for the defender, if he wins 3-2, you just reverse that. So if the attacker doesn't win any of these, then he has to deploy all his forces. Defender can deploy in accordance with that. And then the more that I look at this, more I think this means that after all forces are deployed, the defender begins the turn sequence. Oh, normally the attacker begins the turn sequence, but if the defender wins all 5 of these, in this case, the defender gets to take the first activation. Some pretty powerful stuff. Now, remember we talked about the ace beating a queen, king, a jack, queen, or king? That means the scout can choose a figure to be removed from the table and placed in reserve. So the scouting means that you got so far ahead of your opponent, you knew his plan, that you pick one of his units. And who does that? Who picks that? The side that has captured a scout. Yeah, if you beat your opponent's card, you had an ace and they had a face card, about 1 time in 3, 1 time in 4, you're going to get to say, no, that unit doesn't start on the table. They have to come on as a reinforcement. On turn 2, they come on a 6. On turn, I think that's how this works. And then you add a beginning. It says the figure does not enter on turn 2. Oh, you need a 5 or better to come on turn 2. And then on turn 4, you need a 4 or better. On turn 3, you need a 4 or better. On turn 2, you need a 3 or better, and so on. You get the idea. We've all seen that kind of thing. And then we have nice little references. Nice little Appendix N. Appendix B, Appendix N, references. Who else are we looking at? Bill Lamming, William Sylvester, right? One of the best solo wargaming guides out there. I don't even know Michael Smith. I got to look that up. Neil Thomas, yeah. John Tunstall, Discovering Wargames. You can find a PDF of that online. Really interesting math, really interesting insight into the ways that the hobby developed. And then we have some additional. We have our campaign play, and I already explained to you that this integrates really smoothly into the tabletop battle. So I won't belabor the point. We are going to have some eventually. Remember, this is a beta test. We'll have some scenarios, and as every good game does, a quick reference sheet. Again, you can download that from Wargame Culture. Is it Wargames Culture or is it Wargame? Wargame, it's the singular, .substack.com. Give it a look. We'll get this on the table. I'm not going to do any point-based scenario, like I said, because it's got a really complicated activation sequence. I think it'll flow pretty smoothly once we get into it. Because it has this interesting... Let's check morale first to see if there even is a little imbroglio. Did I get that right? Imbroglio? Is that the word for a little shindig? Little dance? A little tango? And then the defender may withdraw 2d6 inches, which the charge will continue. We all know how that mechanic works. Alternatively, when your might is reduced to 0, you don't die, but you're going to be very susceptible to running away or being killed or captured on the next Valor table check. Your might is reduced to 0, and that means with no dice remaining, the round of combat... Oh, that's a separate thing. If your might is reduced to 0, make a rally check. Failure means you route 2d6 inches directly away from the opposing figure. This is how attackers might charge in, take a beating, and then wind up deciding that this wasn't such a good idea after all, and they are going to wind up retreating. Interesting stuff. I probably got a couple of things a little bit wrong, and hopefully I've provided some insight to the designers and the other playtesters. And when I play out my game, I may get some stuff wrong as well. But that's okay, because you guys are here to teach me. We'll learn from each other, and we'll get a little bit better, and we'll have a great time along the way. Till next time, guys, give it a look. The Killing Fields. I'm praying for you.